Good morning, America. White House in crisis. The bombshell report breaking overnight, raising new questions about Trump's ties to Russia. Members of the president's campaign in regular contact with Russian intelligence officials before the election. And new fallout from General Michael Flynn's resignation. What did the president know about those phone calls with the Russian ambassador?
Mystery assassination. The North Korean leader's half-brother killed at an airport, poisoned by suspected secret agents, covering his face with a liquid-laced cloth. Is this the image of one of the assassins? The new arrest this morning.
That close call for Star Wars legend Harrison Ford. Sources saying he flew dangerously close to a packed American Airlines jet, passing right over the top while landing his plane just 2 years after that crash landing on a golf course. The FAA investigating, will he lose his license?
And rumor has it, the new Best in Show crowned overnight. Rumor, the German Shepherd winning sweet redemption a year after coming oh so close, beating out 2,800 other pups from around the globe. Now this morning, the top dog is here live in Times Square only on GMA.
Live in Times Square, this is GMA with Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, and Michael Strahan.
Good morning, America. How beautiful is rumor? What's the over and under and how many times we're going to hear? Rumor has it.
Right here, and she's here, right here in Times Square. Rumor's here, right here in Times Square. And not only big day for Rumor, but big for Adele's having a big week. Wins 5 Grammys, and then a dog named after her song wins Westminster. That's a good week.
Not so bad, and we're going to meet Rumor in a little bit, but we have some explosive breaking news overnight. That's where we're going to begin. The New York Times reporting that Trump campaign aides and allies had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials before the election. It comes on the heels of Mike Flynn's resignation as national security advisor after the Justice Department warned that he could be vulnerable to Russian blackmail for lying about his contacts with Russia. Our chief White House correspondent John Carl starts us off. Good morning, John.
Good morning, George. That report in the New York Times says that despite repeated denials that members of the campaign team for Donald Trump had repeated contacts with Russian intelligence officials, directly contradicting what the president himself has said. The New York Times reports several of Donald Trump's associates, both inside and outside of his campaign, had repeated contacts with Russian intelligence officials in the year leading up to the election. Sources familiar with the matter tell ABC News that U.S. officials became concerned about the contacts before the election and started to investigate. The Times doesn't say what the conversations were about, but it does name one of the Trump associates that was in contact with the Russians, Paul Manafort. He was Trump's campaign manager before being fired shortly after the Republican convention. The contacts were discovered during the investigation into the hack of the Democratic National Committee. Although U.S. officials told the Times they've seen no evidence that the Trump team cooperated with Russia in the hack or had anything to do with it. But the contact with Russian officials during the campaign contradicts what the White House told us just yesterday. Can you still say definitively that nobody on the Trump campaign, not even General Flynn, had any contact with the Russians before the election?
My understanding is that what General Flynn has now expressed is that during the transition period, well, we were very clear that during the transition period, he did speak with the ambassador.
I'm talking about during the campaign.
I don't have any, there's nothing that would conclude me that anything different has changed with respect to that time period.
Last month, then President-elect Trump flatly denied any communications between Russia and his team.
Did you or anyone in your campaign have any contact with Russia leading up to or during the campaign? Nothing at all.
The bombshell report comes amid outrage over contacts now former Trump National Security Advisor Michael Flynn had with the Russian ambassador before the inauguration.
Flynn was secretly communicating with Russian officials at the same time that Russia was attacking our democracy.
Even some Republicans are concerned.
Obviously, there's an administration that is in significant disarray as far as national security is concerned, and they need to fix that.
And we've just received the first reaction to all this from the White House. It comes in the form of a tweet from the president who writes, "The fake news media is going crazy with their conspiracy theories and blind hatred." He then says that MSNBC and CNN are unwatchable, but Fox is great. We also have reaction, Robin, from the Russians, and it sounds a lot like the reaction from the president. Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for Vladimir Putin, says that the report is not based on any facts, and he advises reporters not to read the morning papers. Let's not believe newspaper reports. It's very difficult to distinguish, to separate the real from the false. Robin?
Not surprising we'd hear that from the Russian authorities. All right, John, thank you. For more on the FBI investigation, we're going to go to our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, who's in Washington. And Pierre, you have been talking to your sources all night, and what are you learning?
Good morning, Robin. The FBI is in the middle of a broad investigation looking into potential ties between Trump associates and suspected Russian intelligence officials. Authorities are investigating travel and phone calls involving Trump associates. In the year leading up to the election, U.S. intelligence has developed a huge list of Russian spies who sometimes pose as business or academic leaders. Authorities are trying to figure out if the Trump associates knew who they were dealing with or were being duped by Russian spies into giving them information. So far, authorities have not uncovered hard evidence that there was any intentional cooperation between the Trump associates and Russian intelligence. Robin?
And Pierre, as far as Michael Flynn is concerned, we know that the FBI has interviewed him, trying to get to the bottom of his relationship with the Russian ambassador.
Sometime in the week after the inauguration, the FBI interviewed Flynn about his conversation with the Russian ambassador. The FBI won't comment, but they're still assessing all the answers he gave, and the Justice Department will have to make a final determination as to whether he told the complete truth. That's important because lying to the FBI, Robin, is a felony.
Yes, we do know that. And many are wondering, what about Jeff Sessions, the new Attorney General? Where does he fall on all this?
Well, Democrats on the Hill are saying he needs to recuse himself because both Flynn and Sessions were both on the campaign trail for Trump. But so far, Sessions has not commented, and we have no idea what he's going to do.
All right, Pierre, thank you.
Okay, Rob, let's get more on this now from Senator Lindsey Graham, a senior member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator Graham, thank you for joining us again this morning. You've read that New York Times report. You've seen the president's tweet this morning saying it is fake news. The president, the vice president, members of his team have consistently denied any contacts with Russia during the campaign. How do you reconcile that with the New York Times?
Well, number one, we're not going to make a decision based on what a newspaper says, but now's time for Congress to up its game. I do know this, that Russia is interfering in the democratic process all over the world. They're actually funding some parties that are pro-Russian and some other democracies. They're trying to break the backbone of democracies. They did hack into Podesta's email. They did hack into the DNC. They did share that with WikiLeaks to interfere in our election. That I believe. Now, here's the question. If there's contacts between the Trump campaign and Russian intelligence officials outside the norm, that's not only big league bad, that's a game changer, and I would change my view as to what Congress should do. If there are contacts between Trump officials and Russian intelligence operatives during the campaign, we need a joint select committee in Congress to get to the bottom of it and also look at Trump's business ties to Russia, if it is true.
Well, the New York Times report is based on intercepted communications. They quote four intelligence officials. So you're prepared to go forward and call for that joint committee?
I want to do a preliminary investigation where members of Congress, myself and Senator Whitehouse are overseeing the FBI's role in this. I want to make sure myself that these intercepts exist, that the communications are outside the norm. If that's the case, it's time for the Congress, in my view, the Senate, to do a joint select committee where we can look at it holistically, not in a compartmentalized way, to get to the bottom of it. Because if it is true, it is very, very disturbing to me, and Russia needs to pay a price when it comes to interfering in our democracy and other democracies. And any Trump person who was working with the Russians in a unacceptable way also needs to pay a price. And maybe none of it's true, but I can tell you this, the Congress is not fake. There are real members of Congress up here, Republicans and Democrats, who love our country and going to make sure that checks and balances that have been in place for 200 years work, even when the president's in your own party.
It also leads to the bigger question, your litany of charges against Russia raised by Tom Friedman this morning. He says the biggest national security question staring us in the face today, what is going on between Donald Trump and the Russians? Right. What's your answer?
Donald Trump is an outlier when it comes to the Russians. I do not know one Republican senator who believes that Russia is anything other than an enemy to democracy, that Russia has tried to interfere in our elections of 2016. I can't explain Donald Trump's view of Russia. Now, starting over, we've tried that twice. So the bottom line here is I'm not going to prejudge why he's the outlier. I'm going to try to find out what relationship his campaign had to the Russians, if any, and if there was a relationship there, then it begins to explain some of his behavior.
Democrats are saying that in order to find out what's really going on there, you need Donald Trump's tax returns. Do you agree?
Maybe so. The first thing I want to do is find out if there was any activity between the Russians and the Trump campaign that was outside the norms, unacceptable. If that is true, then we need to look into all things Russia when it comes to Trump, including his business ties, to help explain where he's coming from. Maybe it's just a policy difference. It's okay for Trump to disagree with Lindsey Graham and other Republicans on how to handle Russia. It would not be okay to have the Trump campaign receiving assistance from the Russians. That would be a game changer.
Senator Graham, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, Matthew Dowd right here as well. So you heard Senator Graham right there. If this is true, he wants a broader, bipartisan investigation. We have never seen anything like this, not even 4 weeks into a presidency.
No, we aren't even a month into this, and we're already in the middle of a controversy. I was thinking, the rumor isn't just an all-star dog. We have rumors all over Washington in this, and I think right now what you're seeing, I think the significance of what Lindsey Graham said this morning and what John McCain has said over the last 24 hours is Donald Trump had a very solid wall of Republicans that had not broken for the last 4 weeks. It's now starting to crack. It's cracking in the Senate, and I think what happened with the report in the New York Times is going to cause cracks in the House, and I think he's right. There is going to probably be a select committee on this issue.
You're also seeing reports from the military as well. I was struck by this from General Tony Thomas yesterday, head of the Special Operations Command. Our government continues to be in unbelievable turmoil. I hope they sort it out soon because we are a nation at war. That's the head of the Special Operations Command.
He's an active general, and as you know, George, they are always reluctant to make any comment about anything related to Washington because that's their commander-in-chief. The administration is in charge of them. And so I think, again, that's another significant thing in the course of this. I think we are at a moment where Donald Trump's presidency is, we've already talked about his moral authority in this and the things that have gone on. We're at a moment, and he has to figure out how does he make a turn in this, because otherwise it's going to deteriorate day to day.
He doesn't seem ready to do that, right?
No, his tweet this morning basically is accusing the media. It's their fault. It's the leakers' fault. It's somebody else's fault, as opposed to there's a command and control problem in the White House he has not dealt with.
Matt, you know, people are waking up and their head is spinning. There's a lot of information, a lot that's coming their way. And you say there is a positive in all of this.
Yeah, I think when you look at what's happened in the course of this presidency so far, as many people were fearful because Republicans had all levers of power. They had the White House, they had the Senate, and then the House. But the American system actually works. We saw it with the judges when the executive order was done, and the judges basically, Democrat and Republican judges, put a stop on it and said, hold off, we have to take a look at this. And then now we've seen it in this, where we had leakers, people in the government that worried about what Donald Trump was doing, and a First Amendment, freedom of the press, that actually worked. So although our system is clunky and it's imperfect, and as Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others, the actually system works.
And we're seeing it in action. Okay, Matt, thanks very much. Let's go over to Michael.
All right, thank you, George. And now to a big headline overseas. Reports that the North Korean leader's half-brother was killed in a planned attack. ABC's Matt Gutman joins us now from London with the latest. Good morning, Matt.
Hey, good morning, Michael. We've just learned that investigators in Malaysia have arrested a suspected female secret agent in this James Bond-style hit right in the middle of a busy airport. At least one, possibly two female assassins using a fast-acting poison to kill the former heir apparent to the North Korean regime. This morning, a suspected female assassin arrested in the brazen poisoning of the heavyset half-brother of North Korea's dictator, Kim Jong-un. Police saying CCTV led them to the femme fatale, a 28-year-old Vietnamese woman local media say is this person in that LOL t-shirt. Police say she was alone at the time of the arrest. Malaysian police adding a 46-year-old North Korean male who sought initial medical assistance at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport died en route to the hospital. It was Kim Jong-nam, the half-brother of North Korean despot Kim Jong-un. Kim awaiting a flight to his home in China when a woman came from behind and covered his face with a cloth laced with a liquid. Police say Kim Jong-nam complained of burning in his eyes. He was rushed to the airport clinic. Dizziness quickly led to death. The poison killing him before he reached the hospital. Kim Jong-nam was reportedly the eldest son of the former North Korean dictator Kim Jong-il. That's them side by side in this awkward family photo from 1981. South Korean government officials believe Kim was traveling on a false passport. It wasn't the first time he traveled on a fake document. Kim Jong-nam came to global attention when he was detained using another fake passport to enter Japan to visit Disneyland Tokyo. Now, we've learned an autopsy is being conducted on Kim. Discovering the type of poison used could tell investigators who commissioned this hit. Right now, evidence pointing to North Korea. Analysts tell us this latest assassination isn't a sign of regime instability there. They say it's just unfinished business in a regime that operates most like a mafia family.
Oh,
guys,
just brutal.
Yeah. Matt, thank you. Now, Amy has the morning's other top story, starting with concerns about that dam in California.
That's right, guys. Crews are frantically working to reinforce the Oroville Dam north of Sacramento as the region braces for more heavy rain tonight. Nearly 200,000 evacuations have been lifted, but that could change if repairs do not hold, and many families are opting to stay in shelters. The repairs could cost $200 million. President Trump has now approved a disaster declaration for the state. And for what's believed to be the first time a so-called dreamer has been arrested during an immigration raid. Protesters have gathered at a jail near Seattle demanding the release of 23-year-old Daniel Medina, who was illegally brought to the U.S. from Mexico as a child. He was protected under former President Obama's Dreamer program. Immigration enforcement officials claim he is a gang member, but his lawyers deny that and say he has no criminal record. Well, a 2-year-old boy is the latest victim of street violence in Chicago. He was killed in a drive-by shooting during an apparent gang hit. No arrests have been made, and this came on the same day an 11-year-old girl died from injuries suffered in a separate shooting. Well, there's a developing story near Corpus Christi, Texas, where crews are on the scene of an apparent natural gas pipeline explosion. The fireball lit up the night sky. The blast reportedly shook homes as far as 60 miles away, but no injuries reported. And an officer in Texas is being praised for his quick thinking. He saw this truck engulfed in flames, approached a fast food drive-thru, so he used his patrol car to push that truck away from the restaurant, protecting everyone inside. And because of his quick thinking, no one was injured. And finally, he's not your typical house pet. His name is Wild Thing. He's a 2,500-pound buffalo raised by a Texas couple since he was a baby. He lives in the house. They've given him his own bedroom. He apparently even eats and sits at the dining room table. They say he's pretty careful not to knock anything over, and he's been described as like having a small car in the house.
A small car?
Did you say he sits at the table?
Yes, he sits at I don't know. Maybe he stands at the table. I don't. He eats from the table.
I can't make myself laugh.
You're not supposed to make sure you can't breathe in deeply or he starts coughing like that.
Sorry.
Thank you, Amy.
Blame Wild Thing.
Yeah. Let's get to Ginger now. Oh, and a difficult time down in Texas.
And you remember, yesterday morning we were talking about the tornado watch. Well, here was the result. 4 confirmed tornadoes in East Texas. We are so fortunate that there were no deaths. And look, people were really taking this seriously. The warnings came out, the watches came out, and they took cover. We thought this was great to show because we don't always get to compliment how well things can go. Then, though, we have to watch out again today. And it's really after the noon hour in the areas that are highlighted here. So southern South Carolina, the jet stream really gets going. Savannah, Brunswick, look at Jacksonville is in that risk area. So you could see damaging winds and hail, but there is a tornadic risk today, too. The timing, again, goes after the noon hour. We stopped it right there at about 2 o'clock. That's when some of those cells could become supercells and individual. That's when it's going to be a problem. All right, let's get to the sunny cities now, brought to you by CarMax.
When you buy a used car, you should feel confident. That's why CarMax has over 40,000 cars to choose from nationwide, with prices clearly marked, the same online as they are in the stores. That should give you some car buying confidence, the type of confidence you need to wear white after Labor Day, the type of confidence to suddenly switch to an English accent for no reason whatsoever. Yep, at CarMax, it's all about confidence. Nothing but net. Nailed it. Or should I say, nailed it, governor.
Umbrellas will be needed this morning south of D.C. near Fredericksburg on east due to some showers mixing in and mostly cloudy skies. Waking up feels like temperatures also off to a cool start, 34 degrees in the D.C. metro. These values are factoring in the wind speeds. As we head into tomorrow, it's going to be a blustery day, those daytime highs in the 30s and our wind chills in the 20s. But we will be heating up this weekend with daytime highs in the 60s.
And coming up, that close call for Harrison Ford. Sources saying the actor flew right over the top of a crowded passenger jet while landing his own plane.